All right, Mr. Hardy, back to you.
Yeah, hope you all had a good lunch. So look, we're now moving to the coast and how it fits into the rest of the region. So maybe we could bring up the next slide, please, the one with the fault line, yes.
So mind if I just ask a question about the plant there? Is the plant is 9 miles? Is it the same sort of type of plant or design as what's proposed here?
The principle's the same. It's got the spirals, which is what the gravity in the water separates. So this will be far more modern. That plant's got a 10-year-old design, but Tim Chase will cover that, I think, in some depth.
And will it look vaguely similar or?
Look similar, yes.
Right, thank you.
Very similar and very similar in scale.
Yeah.
It's just be more modern and more efficient.
Yeah.
But it's similar heights and so on the geology, I'd just like commissioners to switch back, shut your eyes and drop back 500 meters. I don't know if that's
Okay, I'm there now.
Back circa 500 years ago, Gondwana, this big emerging big blob of continent. The west coast, there's a fault line. I talked about this last time. There's a fault line that runs up on the western side of the coast. On the western side of the Alps, I should say. And that's one of the major fault lines in the world. It meanders all the way up to Japan and so on. So there's about 5 or 7 major faults in the world, and this is one of them. Everything to the west of that, in the old continent, was actually joined onto New South Wales and this Queensland. It's very hard for people to visit that, but that's where we were many hundreds of millions of years ago. So the mineralogy of the west coast is very similar to that of the east coast of Australia. It's exactly the same in geological terms. That area includes some of northwest Nelson, a little bit of Marlborough, go down some of Otago and some of Southland. So that was all bolted on. The mineralogy is very similar. The east coast, Canterbury and North Otago, tends to be very devoid of any minerals. That's a more modern geological system that's come through. And so that's why the west coast in particular is so rich. And it's so underexplored because of the probably anti-mining sentiment that's existed in New Zealand for so many years. But that in itself opens up so much opportunity for the west coast. And the mineral sands that we're targeting at the moment is just one small section that could be available the international company. I mean, if this land was in New South Wales, it would have had hundreds of millions of dollars spent on exploration. So we just need to put that in context. But see the dark line that runs up there? There's the fault line. In the south, and that fault line goes all the way down to the mantle, you know, where it's liquid and all bumping away, and over here, there's stuff coming up the fault line. The fault line, if we just go to the next slide, please. In some places, it's relatively distinctive, like, for example, this, you've probably seen photographs in Iceland of the fault line, which is very distinctive. See that line there? That's us along the fault. Other places, it's 1/4 kilometre wide of all meshed up stuff that's all jumbled up. And you have this upward lifting of this type of rock here. So this is what it looks like when it comes out. And you've seen that before, Chair. In the south and the surrounding land, it tends to be more garnet orientated. As you go north, it becomes more ilmenite. But we just briefly look at these rocks here. That one there is predominantly ilmenite. See the black lines in it, and this one here is predominantly garnet, it's more garnet than, and this one here's in between. I'll leave those there for you. So, and the significance of where we are today is that unlike our 9 Mile plant up at Westport, it's predominantly ilmenite. And ilmenite is the ore feedstock for titanium and others. So that's what we're mining or producing and exporting at 9 Mile currently. This one is all about garnet. So that's the product we'll be producing here. Now, they're both about the same weight, roughly 3.8 to 4.2 tonnes per cubic metre. With ordinary silica sands, less than 2. So that's why it's so easy to separate and spiral. It's just spirals and gravity. But the principle's exactly the same. There's no real difference in the two products, except garnet's worth a little bit more than ilmenite in the world markets today. The reason we were keen to start this mine was 2 reasons. One is that it opens up the grade port, which gives us, in itself, makes our company more versatile and more resilient if one port got knocked out by a big quake or a flood or whatever. The second reason is we've now got 2 markets, garnet and ilmenite, and they're very separate markets. So if one market crashed, well, we've at least got the other market. So as a company, it makes the company financially vulnerable.
But you're still getting ilmenite from, you're still proposing to get ilmenite from Mananui. It's just the proportions,
The
or
proportions are far different. They're about, very roughly, it's up there, it's 2/3 ilmenite, 1/3 garnet. Here it's spun around the other way. It's 2/3 garnet, roughly 1/3. But this one's also got gold, whereas the gold, whilst a little bit fine gold, it's not worthwhile recovering up there. But this is, we've got some really rich gold.
and wasn't there monazites or?
There is monazite, but the monazite, the source rocks of the monazite tends to be the Paparavas, which is the in behind Punakaiki, that Papara range. That tends to be, well, that and in the Bulla, the monazite's coming out of the areas further north. There's very little monazite down here.
Right.
Very little. And that takes away the whole radioactivity because monazite is thorium based. So the same issues, you know, there's a lot of questions up at 9 Mile about radioactivity. Well, they don't really exist down here because the source rocks are different.
And is the variation in concentrations the result of the source, or is it the result of the way, once it's gone downstream from the Alps, its deposition?
Look, it varies, but roughly the percentage of HMC, the heavy mineral concentrate, is pretty much the same all up the west coast. It's just as it goes north, it tends to become smaller grain because the sea grinds it down as it moves northwards. But the concentrations in the sand dunes, which were laid down roughly 10,000 years ago, which is very in modern times, is about the same.
But is like there's more garnet at Mananui than there is at 9 Mile.
Yes.
Is that a function of coastal processes or something?
No, it's the source rocks.
The source rocks.
Yes, in the south, more so than in the north.
Right.
So if you look at these rocks here, like that's how big the garnets are as they come out of down the rivers. But by the time it gets to here, the average grain size is called 1 millimetre. Up at 9 Mile, it's a fifth of that size because it's ground down. Now, in ilmenite, it doesn't matter if it's fine because it all gets melted, put in a big pot and melted up effectively. Whereas the garnet, they want it roughly that coarse garnet, that call it 1 millimetre size for the sandblast.
Excuse my ignorance, but the reason you prefer sand is that it's effectively the natural process doing the work of grinding that would otherwise have to be done for coarser material, is
Yes,
that?
to a degree, yes.
Yeah.
So, where have we got to? So look, I just wanted to explain that this time it's going to look really, it'll predominantly be a red. If we just go to the, so that's the fault line. You can see the fault line where it runs up. That's sort of inland from Watapu, further south here. And that's the principal geological. If we just go to the next slide, please. So this slide on the left is a typical cross section of what we're mining. You can do that on the beach, look just like that. Alternatively, you could be doing that 10 meters down and it'll look just like that. There's layers of ilmenite. Sometimes you see layers of the light colour stuff is the silica sand or the silica sand, which we put back in the hole, and that's roughly 80%. We're keeping about 20%. That's what it looks like. The next slide, it's a combination. If you get up there close, you can see some red ones, we'll see some yellow ones or yellowish, some black. And in the four main product lines in the end slide, the red stuff's the garnet, the black ilmenite, the zircon is the top right hand one, and the monazite is the yellow one. They're all weigh kind of the same. They're all heavy, put it that way. The monazite is the heaviest, the garnet is the lightest. So that's what is in the mix. So we'll go to what's the next? Now, and you talk about the separation. These are the spirals that we use. And primarily, there's a trommel, which you will see, which is a big revolving, just like all the gold screens that you've seen on the West Coast. And we have a, I think, is it a 2 millimeter sieve on it? So everything beneath 2 millimeter drops through, and we save that, and we can then pump it to the top of the spirals. And it goes around the spirals like this. The rest goes straight back into the void, into the hole. And Tim will explain it better, but it's just like the heavies congregate in the lowest point on the inside, and the light ones sort of go out there, and there's a little bit like a drafting race there that you can adjust, and that's what the staff are trained to do, just to make sure you're getting the right amount of separation and you're getting the heavies in one race, and all the lights go out and pumped away. So it's a very simple process, no chemicals, it's clean, it's efficient, and it works.
So it's sort of like a gold miner's pan, just using
It's
gravity
exactly the same principle.
on scale.
So I think that covers the geology. Just one point I would like to make also on the geology is it's always, I got a little frustrated sitting through the last hearing about the amount of effort to put the landscape back to exactly how it was. And I found that quite interesting. There was so much emphasis on it, had to go back, all the sand dunes had to be exactly the same. The environment is naturally changing all the time. Like Mount Cook, for example, if there was no erosion, it would be approximately 20 kilometres higher than that. But it's only 3 kilometres. That's 17 kilometres is gone. It's interesting driving up here from Westport a couple of days ago, up the Buller River, just below Hawke's Crag. There's a massive gravel deposit, like some acres, meters and meters high. It's just appeared in the river. Now, why is it done that? It's always constantly changing. The dunes, you look at the old aerial photographs, which we've got, those dunes up at 9 Mile are always changing. Like the wind changes them. erosion changes them. So we should be conscious that it's a very changing environment all the time. We look at the Hokitika River, which is the river just here. It runs 70 kilometres from the top of the Alps to here, 70 kilometres. Yet the Hokitika Trench goes out for over 100 kilometres from here. And how did that trench get there? Admittedly, there would have been a fault line, because it's usually a fault line along the river. That's because the glaciers went out for 100 kilometres here during the ice ages. So if you look at this, geology is all tied in with these ever-changing environments. But that's a bit of useless information, but it's I think it's quite relevant to the whole picture of what we're trying to do here. Anyway, moving on. Look, Ray Mudgeway, I was going to talk briefly about shipping, but Ray will cover that. And then the final point is I would like to talk about the engagement with the iwi. Now, this is something that I've been involved with for many years. Here, I've known many local iwi and still know quite a few of them. And I make particular mention of Paul Wilson from Bruce Bay. Paul he passed away during COVID, unfortunately. He taught me a lot about the local geology, a lot about the local wildlife, everything, because Paul was just such a natural leader and an amazing man. But we've also got Paul Madgwick, who's a very close friend of mine, and I brought along Paul's recent book. I don't know who's read this book, but you have to read it, everybody, or at least browse through it, because this was only released a couple of months ago. It's really a lifetime work from Paul. It's the history of the iwi in Westland from way back. Magnificent contribution. So but I'm going to leave it here. So if any of want to have a quick browse through it. Then, I've been engaged with Francois for many years.
What was the size of the Māori population on West Coast pre-European?
Oh, we won't all, but I couldn't answer. But it's quite, if you just look at some of the photographs there, it's quite interesting. It's amazing that the history's never been written in that format beforehand. So it's a real asset, that book. But I've always, there was a great battle fought at Lake Mananui in the 17th century. And when we started looking at this land, I was very surprised and a little bit mortified to find that where the battle was fought was on our freehold land, which we now own. And it should never have been in private ownership, but it was. And, it's just I guess there was some surveyor in some dark office in London or Birmingham in the 18th century, a surveyor, and some diagrams came back, and he was subdividing the land, and there was a question. Who knows how it came about, but it was. So we purchased this land, and I've always maintained it should. There's about 30 hectares that should go back to the iwi. So I've talked to Paul and to Francois and their teams. They've got great teams, both the iwi groups here. They're credit to them compared to some of the other iwi teams I've dealt with. So I've always said that I wanted to somehow give that back to the iwi and also provide access to the general public, because you've got that resource. If we go, the next, that's the geology. Try to put in there. A friend of mine, Pat Cooper, put that on the beach, and it's all, sometimes it cuts black, sometimes they cut red, going back to the geology. It's just depends how it's cutting. So it just shows you, most people associate the West Coast features as black. That shows that sometimes they cut red. And it's just the work in the tides and the moon and everything else. So we just go through to the next one, please. Right. So primarily, I'll just come up here briefly. Lake Mananui is here, and depending on the in full flood, the water comes right up to here, and the Mananui stream flows out here. It's got a new name in recent years. I'm not quite sure why, but I can't pronounce it, so I still call it the old name. But we own all this green here, which is I think roughly 200 metres out to be into what could be described as the lake. So we've proposed that will be gifted back to the iwi. But we've also got the dock administered reserve on the south side, and we've got the dock administrative walkway which goes down on the north side. And we've always proposed a public access way to link the two, so that the bird watchers or walkers or whomever could actually have access through there. We made the offer to DOC. They were less than enthusiastic because it wasn't in their budgets or in their short-term plans, but so because they work on plans for run out for 5 or 7 years. So that's been, but we're making a pledge as a company that there will be a corridor for the public that will sit immediately behind the land we're gifting to Iwi, so that that corridor can at some stage be joined in the future. No one, of course, wants responsibility of it. I think we've also talked to the council about it, and they didn't want it either. So
So Mr. Hardy, has the iwi, have they confirmed that they'd like to take this land over or not?
Very much so.
They have, right. And is that in the updated letter, is it?
No. So I can just clarify that. There's obviously been discussions with iwi on this, but we didn't want to bind the iwi from being able to make full submissions on this project in terms of how important the environment is. So there's been no commitment to do that unless resource consent is granted.
Right.
And iwi have full. There's no, so quite often in agreement you might have a binding, so we'll offer you this and you won't submit or things like that. So the offer is there and it's been drafted in a way that they've all considered it, but it's not been accepted, and the same with the commitments to DOC, so that they're able to fully participate in this process. And it's only if consent's granted that those will be given effect to.
So do you see this something sitting outside of the consent process, that it won't be subject to a condition being vested?
So there's a condition of consent that's in the condition set, which essentially says that it will be offered to iwi, and in the event that iwi for some reason don't accept, it will be protected permanently with a crown, sort of a backfill position. So ultimately, at the end of the day, this project will permanently protect that area. It'll either be through cultural protection as part of iwi, or it will be protected by way of reserve that is owned by DOC. The preference of the company is that it is offered to iwi, and that will be the first thing that happens.
Okay. Yeah. And you talked about the cultural, associations with the battle that occurred there. Is that, and do you have any knowledge of where that occurred on that?
Well, it's a little bit was 300 years, a little bit vague. It was my understanding, certainly Paul's that we command, that it was roughly in that swamp land. It was more in the water, I understand. But look, I could be wrong. these discussions have been going on with the iwi for at least the last decade. So it's not something that just came dreamt up with it. I've always said it'd be my legacy to the West Coast iwi came up with great respect. So and now burdened the company with it. So anyway, that's still work in progress, but we also wanted to make it broader than just the iwi, so that the public, you know, the West Coasters and anyone else who before you do best of land that should have it.
Just ask a question about that. You talked about the Mananui walkway. And is that the Mananui bush? See, like,
Although, if we
might need to go to the actual wider.
if we went up, see, there's the main road.
Yes.
This is all the Lake Mananui Reserve here.
Yes.
That's the walkway where you can park your car up there.
Right.
And you can walk down here and then you go over down here. This is where I was going to generously take you through for a walk one morning, but I'm not allowed to. Beautiful walk, and you come down along here. Actually, if you just forward the
Can you just show that again?
next photograph, please. Just the next photograph. Yeah, this shows here. See, here's the lake. The walkway is down here. Our land comes out to about here somewhere, so we shouldn't be owning that. That should never be in freehold land. That should have been invested with the lake. And here's the farm comes up to here. So we've always said we want the right to be able to mine the existing, whatever was farmed, we should be able to mine. Then we would give everything else back. But we would actually not only give them all the swampland. See, if you came here in a big flood and took that photograph, it would all be water. But you go there in a drought and you can literally walk out to where our boundary is.
So you actually, if you look at the next photograph, which has got colour in it, where it says stage 1 is part of your land down through there, is that right?
Where's stage? Where's?
See the words? Does your land
Oh, yes.
run down through there?
This is the part we'd like to mine first.
Yeah.
And the reason the plant will be sitting in here somewhere.
You know, my question was, you said the part of the land shouldn't have ever been in the title.
It's that bit there.
Can you point out where that is? You said there was a piece of land that should never have been in the title. Can you point out where that is?
But it's all back there.
It's the east of the sky.
Because
Should say the conditions 9.11.
I wonder just a minute just to try and work out the alignment of the Mahina walkway and Mananui walkway. Tim, can you bring up the landscape graphic attachment? I think it's map 2, I think, from memory. Yes, graphic attachment, map 2, I think. Yeah. Can you bring that in a bit? Right.
There's number 1 in your bundle.
that's the application area in yellow. But our land comes out to about here, and then the lawn is all the way along here.
Oh, I
That's
see.
that's the 30 hectares or thereabouts. We would be listing back. And again,
This is the Mahina walkway here. So I just want to.
Would you like me to clarify?
Yes, please.
So
Doesn't.
you're correct. So the public walkway goes past, and then if you look at the boundary, the application site there, the yellow boundary, what Mr. Hardy's talking about is creating an opportunity where longer term that could become purple and connect to the purple line in the dock reserve.
Right.
So he's acknowledging that there's a reserve on the south side of the property, and there's a reserve, a walkway, a public walkway on the north side. And he's simply enabling by ensuring that there's a, distance of land, I think it was 10 metres from the edge of the newly planted ecological reserve that will be left and made available should there's DOC suggest in the future that the Lake Mahinapua Purple Line South want to connect up through the site to the other public way.
To go south generally.
Yeah. It would require a connection through the DOC reserve to extend a walkway up through their own land. But he's acknowledging that that is the only private land that would prevent that walkway occurring. I should clarify that that is not part of this proposal. And that the challenge we've got is, it's not appropriate right now to subdivide off this area that Mr. Hardy talks about, because what will happen is, as part of mining, it is proposed to direct vegetation transfer and create an ecological reserve that will extend beyond the current line, and the subdivision will occur on the edge of that newly created environment as well. So the conditions provide for the requirement to permanently protect it and provide proof of that as part of the consent. But that's, to provide that certainty for this process. But the walkway aspect is a conversation that's occurring in parallel. Yeah.
We've also had,
It's a visionary thing because it requires a lot of, commitment of a number of people to achieve that.
we've also had preliminary discussion with DOC. They don't own the car park where they currently have the car park, they just use it. So we've said that as part of all this, we'll tidy up, we'll build a proper car park for them, we'll give them for that land at the moment, so that everything's being done for the future, but that's work in progress. But I'm giving a commitment to that extent.
Correct, but it doesn't form part of your deliberations in terms of.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to let you know that these discussions have been going on for a long time, all with Francois and their teams. I've got to know them all pretty well. Except that this is anyway, moving on. So look, that was in closing. I just wanted to very briefly talk about a company which I formed in Australia around 25 years ago now. We led New South Wales and in fact Australia in biodiversity offsets. Now, I know everybody tries to be green, but I think I'll leave this here for you guys to read it my but I sold out of a business. I went to Scandinavia and Northern England, studied biodiversity laws over there, which were leading the world at that stage in biodiversity offsets. Came back, talked to Bob Carr, whom I knew, the Premier of New South Wales, and I was on the team that put in place the biodiversity offset initial agreements in New South Wales. We set up a company then, the first company in New South Wales, first company in Australia that traded in environmental land. And this is just a map. We started off buying mangrove swamps, we were freehold and cleaned them up. And the model was we buy sensitive land, joining national parks, that national parks wanted but couldn't afford to buy it. And then we would trade it. Primary mining companies or developers, whoever wanted these, we'd get all the credits certified. And we put through over the last 2 years, something like 40,000 hectares went through that company. I just sold the last one about late last year. It was an interesting concept. So this is something I've been, I guess I was the pioneer in Australia, and been talking to the successive New Zealand governments without much luck. And the RMA Act was just set in stone anyway. But that's something that I'm fairly familiar with, and I understand the principles of it. That there's a better way than just having little isolated pockets of bush that you can actually create these big corridors and have meaningful acreages of environmentally sensitive land sooner than scatter the area. So that's something that I've really believed in over all the years. And but that's it. So look, and I just like to thank you for your time, and I'm sure you'll deliberate and come up with a decision. So thank you.
Thank you, just a moment.
No further.
Yeah, just one question, Mr. Hardy. You mentioned at the start of your presentation that you also owned a 160 hectare farm to the south
Yes.
with good resource potential. And you said that's going to be a feeder into this one.
Yes.
And so is it envisaged that product will come to this concentration, to this treatment plant to be processed? Is that what's envisaged?
Yes, but that will be a separate application.
Right, yeah.
But with the plant, he will have the capacity. Because what's the capacity per rate will the plant have?
200 average of 200 tonne.
200 tonne per hour, but we won't start off on that. Just as we started off, it'll take us 2 to 3 years to get to that. There's the garnet down south is we have a EP. We've got an EP on it. We're working up a mining license on it now, which NZP should approve.
Actually, approved, mate.
Oh, it's approved. Okay, so we've now got the mining license from NZP. And the next thing we will be doing is putting a resource consent for that. But it won't be nearly to this detail. Be much smaller mine. And also we won't be upgrading it to the same standard that this plant will. We'll bring it up here and then we'll run it through this plant. So, and we're going to be able to cart it up without putting any more trucks on the road, because there's a lot of front, particularly fertilizer and other freight goes down, trucks come back empty. And so we'll be speaking to the local transporters that they will bring that cargo back loaded, firstly, not much.
And that's part of the reason for it being located adjacent to the state highway, the plant.
Well, this plant was one reason. It's not the major reason, but also same state highway runs that dissects the property we've got down south. So
Okay.
all
Right.
right, well,
Cool. Thanks very much.
oh, well, thank you. And and we'll be inspecting both the walkway, the site, and also hopefully getting up to what's it called?
To access the bush walkway, we go down the boundary of your property.
Yes.
north.
If you drive down, you'll see there's a docks. Is there a dock sign?
Yeah.
Yes. And just park in the car park. So you're actually parking on our land, but we'll give you approval. And you just walk down there, and it's look, if you would allow, you go over the bridge, you actually go past an old sawmill site, which has been restored by the Heritage Society, and you'll get the feel of it. If you allow a good hour to walk for 30 minutes, you'll go over the bridge and so on, then 30 minutes back.
Cool.
If you're real adventurous, you can go the whole circuit, but it'll probably take you about. All right, then, well,
All right.
I missed what's on next.
Just for the panel's benefit, we've slightly shuffled some of the experts in the next segment, so we're anticipating that we will meet the timeframes. And just to clarify that that what Mr. Hardy talks about is not part of this application, and the experts haven't assessed anything further south that's being focused on this application for you.
All right. Welcome, Mr. Mananui.
Thank you very much.
Floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, I think last time I was in front of you, I had one staff member, so it's been a reasonably big 2 years. And today, you can see obviously here, the company's book about significantly. So I think it's fair to say we're not afraid of hard work. I hope you see that because where we've got to this point, but also I think in terms of the team's been really engaged with the community to do that even today, and we'll continue through the hearing. So it's good to be back. I think we've learned a great deal. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes. I think last time there were a bunch of questions about how sustainable is this for the West Coast. And as a proud West Coaster, there's been plenty of ventures started or talked about that haven't come to fruition or have sort of kicked into gear and sort of fizzled away. So there are a lot of questions about how sustainable is this, how meaningful is it, how do we make it sustainable, not just environmentally, but also financially. So I just want to cover a couple of very quick slides. You can always go back to these. A key thing for us is that to really pull this thing together and make sure that it is meaningful and it will go for the 100 years we have resource for the company. We've tackled each part of the strategic chain: land ownership, ports, shipping, plants, staff, IP, etc., etc. So that's one of the big differences, I suppose, with how we tackle it. Now, of course, the workload to do that and the hurdles of what we've overcome have been very large. But that's what we promised in the hearing back in the report, must be less than 3 years ago now. And that's what we've continued to really strive for. So this slide just really talks about the competitive strategy. I think the key thing here is it gives you protection against cost controls. It also gives us that competitive element. So although we are a West Coast based business, we're actually in a global market. So we must be able to compete globally in order to sustain this, underpin the developments and the large scale investments required to actually do it.
Yeah.
And the investments, already in this company, runs into dollars even to this point. As you go up the curve, the steps get larger. So it doesn't get easier, it gets larger. So that's what we sort of just fell on the slide. I think the key thing is, we just go to the next one. We've talked about this. We've really drilled into the strategic sense. There's 2 mining districts. What do we mean by mining districts? Well, what we mean is the associated infrastructure, roads, good bridges down here. The road between here and Greymouth is very resilient, quite modern, and not susceptible like other parts of the West Coast. So it's good, resilient landside infrastructure. We've got a great airport here, got a great town we're sitting in, and we've got the port of Greymouth. So you can tie your in-ground resources closely with all of that infrastructure, and that gives us a low cost base from which to operate. We get asked a lot about why ship off the West Coast. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's been done. That's why we're here, really. The river ports are there for a reason, and the towns around them are there for a reason. So we're sort of going back in time, and it's been done very well and at scale over a long period of time. So that's what we're doing. We're reinstating that structure. But if you also look at it from a global competitive perspective, you can't fight fundamentals. So we've got a great in-ground resource. Distance costs money. Doesn't matter how smart you are, it does. And so the shorter the distance you take this material, the more competitive you are. But of course, you also get a corresponding less CO2 emissions. So we're not taking product a vast distance before it gets onto a ship and off to market. So if you think about your 9 Mile example, that's our first pilot plant for our ilmenite play to the north, called the Ulla Mining District. And then Hokitika South District, Mananui is the first stage of that. The application we're assessing here. The significance here is that you make these large scale investments up front now. You work as hard as you can to make it to work on every level that gives you the social license, and then you just continue to expand it because you've got that social license to sustain a sector and industry on the coast. So that's probably slightly different language to what we were talking about last time I was in front of you. That's that sort of dialing in the strategy, and that there are 2 major plays: Bulla South Ilmenite, South of Garnet. Next slide, please. This is just a slide. This has been done by Rothschild globally, and this is a comparison of our particular resources on a global scale. Talks about the size of it along the x-axis and the grade, so how much mineral content is within the ground up the y-axis. And the significance of this slide is that both Hokitika South and Buller South are not only world-class in terms of scale, they are world-class in terms of mineral concentrate. So we have got some of the best deposits without question in the world. That's not a sales pitch, that's based on facts and data. So again, if you link back to what can this mean for the West Coast and for New Zealand, it's a sustainable, global competitive industry for years.
So what's the y-axis?
The y-axis is the heavy mineral concentrate. So if you take a hand of sand, it's saying 25% of it, or 20% of it if you look at Hokitika South.
Yeah, and the x-axis is
It's scale.
scale.
So that's in millions of tonnes. So if you look at Hokitika South, it's about 100 million tonnes of resource. If you look at Buller South, it's about 1 billion tonnes of resource. So this is world class. And it's something that, you know, the more we explore, the more data we get, the more we realise that we're on something of significance for generations. And I think that's the key to our whole philosophy and how we approach these tasks like the hearing and develop Mananui. It's with the future in mind.
And is all the resources, is it all in recoverable locations?
Yeah, so we really focused our strategy around private freehold land. So we don't delve into what you might say is more contentious areas. So this is just under our license of private freehold land. Yeah. It's about 20,000 hectares. It's large. Just go to the next slide. And more importantly, you can't ignore the market. Do things in isolation. So like these graphs show, the source confident here is PZMI, which is a globally recognised industry body based in Western Australia. Left-hand graph there is around ilmenite, and what that shows is the 60 tons of HMC of ilmenite stuff. And on the right, it talks about the compounding growth rates of garnet globally. So obviously there's plenty of demand for us to create something off scale, without sort of tanking the market or creating, if you like, downstream or global impacts. On the right is the garnet as well. One of the unique things about WMS with its holdings is that we actually cover a range of spectrums of the garnet. So Duncan was talking about earlier about further south, that's Mananui. It's a key of the garnet, so that fills up a segment of the garnet market that doesn't exist further north, including here and further north up the coast. So we actually cover different segments within the garnet market. Garnet market is quite a lot more complex than the ilmenite market. But again, if you go back to sustainability, how you compete and how you protect against commodity cycles or, you know, what happens globally with resources coming on, where you have quite a suite of minerals in there. Of course, gold's the other one, which speaks for itself in the moment. Next slide, please. And I think the last thing is, I'm not going to run through this. We're a company that does stuff, not necessarily talks about doing it. We are very proud of what we've achieved in a short period of time. And if you go back to your hearing notes from 9 Mile, we stand by what we say we're going to do. There's always a few wobbles. A very notable one in September last year, which I'm sure you can ask me about. But you know, we are really focused on this long-term vision and our strategy for the coast. So, and we continue to do that every day. So this will be no different. And that's me. So I hope that I just wanted to make sure I didn't take too much time.
Thank you. Any question? That's right.
Just one question you talked about, the wobbles that you've covered off in your evidence, one of which was sediment pond breach.
Yes.
I'd be just interested to know what you took from that incident and how you applied that to the design of the value of this.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Actually, each site visit will help paint this picture as well. There's a few things that I took out. Now, I'm not an expert in any of this, just one is, I don't think the design anticipated some of the flood events. That was a high rainfall event, which actually inundated sediment pond. That's one. So make sure we've got capacity in the system. There was
Freeport.
Freeboard, but also just the sheer amount of water that fall out of the sky over here in a short period of time, you know, so it was just a massive amount of rainfall, so inundated a part of the wall breached right off the sediment pond, you can view yourself, bring it up there. And then that ran into, that was actually on our farm, but onto the plant drain. So that was one, making sure that you account for the events that, you know, can be pretty remarkable things. We've actually built a whole bunch more sediment ponds, so there's a tiered approach down, so there's more capacity built in through there. That's the second one. But the third thing is, and I think I would have said it to the commissioners last time, we do not ever say that we're not going to make mistakes or something's going to go wrong. The key thing from that perspective is what's the intent of what we're trying to do, which is do it right. The second thing is if something does go wrong, there was a shutdown, dealt with the issue with no questions, put it back together, and we have a big issue soon. So quite a lot of learnings to take into this one.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to seeing the site visit. It looks like a lot of work. An impressive amount of infrastructure that's gone in.
Yeah, and hopefully when you get up there, you'll see, you know, through your own eyes, just the attention to detail and, you know, all won't work to improve, whether it's health and safety, whether it's rehab stuff, you know, soil testing, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, hopefully it's quite good for the huge here to go back and see that's what come off the sheets of paper.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like now.
Yeah, it's quite hard to visualize it initially, and when it's first looked at, but it does actually look a bit like what we saw in the plan.
Well, it's quite interesting. You'll recall some people were worried about the spirals and crushing the rocks, because I think that was starting you crushing this up. And I remember some of the opposition neighbours when we took them out on site once was, but said, oh, the spirals don't actually spin. So it's the difference between a, you know, piece of paper, actually go and stand on the plant, you get a sense of the mills, which you can talk all in, you don't have the fingers on, see just water rapidly, they don't spin. So big funny stuff. So it's seen as believing actually. So I'm quite excited if you guys are going back and have a look and seeing how together.
And how's is it what was the name of that impressive wetland that went inland? What's it called again? It had a name.
So there's, you know, Carrie.
Silverstream. Yeah, the one at the back. I think you walked into, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, Silverstream.
Yeah, the blind road sort of comes up on top of that you guys can have a look. Yeah, so that's you'll see that in action, the silk fencing and the offsets. You'll see the bushes undisturbed. You'll be able to see, you know, the sediment control plans in place. I think one of the things on water that we've also learned is that we're not the only people with an impact on that body of water. So I think the power of that baseline monitoring comes through to something like the water will be too, for example, got nothing to do with the mines. There's a whole bunch of really good learnings out of that Blind River discussion we had last time. So
yeah, I do recall the ecotones of that wetland were just extraordinary. Amazing.
Well, I think one of Duncan's points, what we really wanted to do is actually join those two wetlands up. I think that's part of our frustration with some of the constraints. Is would have been a great ecological outcome being able to connect those two up. But of course, the OMA wouldn't allow us to do that in that particular case. But we've seen those two areas that really well fenced off and separated from that.
Thank you. Excellent. No further questions.
Thank you very much.
Then the next company witness is Miss Debbie Birch, and she's really just going to come and introduce herself. She's done a short statement and be available for any questions.
Good night, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko taki tēnei te waka, ko taupu moana te awa, ko Ngāti te whare tō te iwi, ko Debbie Birch ahau. So yes, I'm only going to speak for a couple of minutes. What I would say is that this is probably the biggest secret unknown to most of New Zealand, is this company. I had not heard of WMS until I was approached to consider the chair role. I came down and probably had the longest interview of my life with Duncan. 3 days, so yes, but you know, you have to understand, you know, this is more than 20 years of, you know, Duncan working away, sampling, to get to this point where the creation of the company is more than 20 years work. So that to me was pretty impressive. But when I look at businesses, when I consider board roles, and when others consider me for a board role, to kind of try and make sure that there is an alignment of values. So for me, you know, values first. Are these people for real? Do they do what they say? Is there some authenticity? So that was the first hurdle. So for me, you know, Duncan's very passionate. I met Ray and others in the team. Everyone was basically speaking from the same script. So I thought that's great, it's very impressive. And then I kind of looked at the business through 3 PO. People, planet, profit or prosperity. So people and planet first, because that's the Maori way and that's the way I think. So met all the people, was very impressed with the quality of people like Tim and Heather and others, and you will see from the application the quality that is you know evident within the application. You see the quality of people in that. And I think that's quite impressive. Secondly, and you will see this when you go up in a helicopter and you'll be able to look down. For me, the most important part was the environmental piece. Does the company, how do they restore and rehabilitate? And you can't really see it from the road. When you're up in a helicopter and looking down, you'll be able to see exactly how they do it. And that was probably, for me, the most impressive piece. And then you go to prosperity, you know, what is the benefit to the region? Well, it's many multiples. It's actually quite incredible. Because it not only is going to, this business, when it's fully commercialised, will not only benefit the region, West Coast, but it's going to unlock a whole lot of other things as well. And iwi, particularly in the South Island, have a lot of different plans and projects, but it just needs money, capital, activity. So I think there's a much bigger piece here that excites me. That's all I wanted to say, and happy to take any questions.
No questions.
I think it was very interesting reading your evidence and the fact that the company chose you shows that you're on the masthead, so you obviously believe in it, which is great.
I'm very excited actually. So anyway, I hope this goes well.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So who's next?
So next will be online, Mr. Ritchie. So we've shuffled him slightly. He prepared a geology and radiation brief. And I think he'll probably read it, it's very brief, his summary statement, and then be available for questions. Oh, yeah, there he is. Tom, you might be on mute. And if you'd like, we could move to another speaker to give you time. Or...
Working? Yep, a little bit. Can you say something?
Tom, I think we've got you now.
Is that working?
It is.
Oh, sorry about that. Kia ora everyone. My name is Tom Ritchie. I've prepared a statement of evidence dated 19th of May in relation to the site geology and radiation. My qualifications and experiences are set out in that statement of evidence. My role in relation to this application includes providing evidence in relation to the geology of the resource, the mineral resource estimate at the site, the testing and results of potential radiation at the sites. So in summary of that work and previous evidence, the site has been extensively drilled and sampled. The geology and the mineralogy is very well characterised. Representative drill samples and 100-ton bulk sample were subjected to processing into a heavy mineral concentrate and a tailings fraction, and both sent for radiation testing. The average combined radioactivity concentration for the tailings was 0.25 becquerel grams, and for the heavy mineral, the average was 0.45 becquerel grams. These are sufficiently low as to be of no regulatory concern. The International Atomic Energy Agency transport regulations also do not apply, as the values are well below the 10 becquerel limit. The average combined radioactivity concentration for both the tails and heavy mineral fractions at Mananui are approximately half that measured values at the 9 Mile mine. The mine has now, as you've heard from Ray and Duncan, has been operating for over 2.5 years, and exported tens of thousands of tons of heavy mineral concentrate without any issues, concerns, breaches of consent with respect to radiation. This has been confirmed in the officer's report by West Coast Regional Council. However, in saying that, a highly precautionary approach has been taken with respect to radiation to ensure the safety of both the community and the surrounding environment with respect to radiation. And conditions are proposed to monitor the radiation levels for the duration of the mine operation. So that's my summary, and happy to take questions on any of that.
Yeah, just one. Sorry, Mr. Ritchie. So you mentioned on paragraph 28, you talk about a 0.24 millisieverts reading. That's obviously different to what you've just told us today. I'm not quite sure why, but could you explain that? And just also whether it complies with any sort of regulatory guidance on that.
So the millisieverts measurement that you refer to is really a dose measurement. So that was kind of an exposure to humans, and that is different from what I mentioned before, whereas that was testing of the actual potential radioactivity of the material that's being handled in the proposed operation. Whereas that millisieverts there is a baseline radiation reading that you could take anywhere in New Zealand or anywhere in the world that would give an indication of the naturally occurring radiation at a given point. So what the company has done and described in that there is set up a baseline monitoring survey for what is the background radiation at the site. So they've set out 4 of these dose detectors. That's really to generate some baseline data. So those monitors will continue to be monitored once the mine is in operation, if the mine is consented, and therefore have a baseline to say the activity that's proposed has, if it has increased that background radiation exposure at the site boundaries. So that's the difference of those 2 numbers. The millisieverts there, 0.25 relates to a condition that we're proposing, that if the site through its operation had increased the radiation detected at the boundaries to over, significantly over that background reading, then, action would be taken.
So what's the threshold beyond which action will be taken?
I think in the proposed conditions, it's 1 millisievert above that background radiation over a period of 12 months.
Yeah.
Just one question. As I understood the evidence, there was a mineral concentration gradient that went lower to higher as you went towards the eastern escarpment. Is that correct?
Sorry, the question was the concentration of heavy minerals greater in the east. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so the distribution of heavy minerals at the site is controlled by its formation. That easternmost portion of the deposit, which was shown in a map that Duncan put up, the stage 1 beach building event, is by far the most concentrated, and you can see that in the figures attached to my evidence that shows not only is the grade highest in that easternmost third of the deposit, the thickness is greater as well. So therefore the overall tonnage of heavy mineral is greatest along that eastern escarpment boundary.
And that's a function of the coastal processes and so forth, is it?
Yeah, the degree of concentration. So the deposit was formed after a period of high sea levels. So there's a shoreline that runs sort of along where the wetland or the stream is now currently. So there was a period of high concentration. The seas come right in, and as it starts to retreat out, you're depositing all those minerals that have been concentrated through that period as the seas marched in, and then the grade progressively decreases towards the east. And that's also, I'd like to note, that's where the majority of the gold within the deposit sits along that boundary. And again, that's a function of that high levels of concentration at the start of formation.
And why the high levels of concentration at the start of formation?
Because you've had a period where the sea has been moving in, so it's not actually depositing, so that the sea is at a sort of a high stand, and you're getting it's recycling material as it moves in that's previously been concentrated. So if you think sea level rise, and as that shifts to and this is all related to glacial cycles. So as the sea starts to retreat, then those heavy minerals are preserved. They're concentrated, and then as it starts to retreat, they're deposited and preserved along that margin.
Right. So for some reason, the original sea level at that point has the highest level of concentration, and as it recedes, those concentrations diminish.
Yeah, if you think of it as it's got to be preserved, right? So you can have the beach coming right in, depositing these minerals, but if the next day the beach removes those materials, then they're actually just going to be concentrated further as the weaker minerals are broken down and washed offshore. So that's really, the main reason why it's strongly concentrated along that boundary.
And in a geological time sense, was the period of sea level falling away, reducing, relatively short compared to the previous period?
Not necessarily. I guess one point to add here is these are incredibly young, so they've only formed within the last 10,000 years, so geologically very young. The shoreline that runs along the eastern margin is actually the same shoreline that we're dealing with at the 9 Mile site. If you remember, the dune there was highly enriched right up hard against that shoreline. That's where the best grades sat. And essentially what we're looking at is the same, a point in time between the two resources at the different sites. So right up and down the coast, it's actually called the 9 Mile shoreline. You see this high level concentration sitting hard up on that boundary.
Okay, so yeah, it's a feature that runs right through, and that was the second line dune on the 9 Mile side? Because there was a large dune on the eastern side of the site, so western side, and then there was a second line dune, is that right?
Yes, correct. The one that's currently being mined by the company at the site. Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, thank you. Thanks for that, geology lesson.
Another question.
Sorry, one more question.
Mr. Ritchie, I note some of your figures, they represent different densities of heavy metal concentrate, and obviously it's proposed to mine the whole site. So what's the minimum density where it's economic to mine?
When you say density, I think what you're referring to is the level of heavy mineral per given area, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we would refer to that as the grade. And at this site, the way, and Mr. Tim Chase will talk to this more, the way the mine's designed is actually to maximise the operation right across the grade range at the site. So, you know, one of those areas in the west, for example, if you're trying to design your whole mine around just that and that grade, it wouldn't work. But it's all about how to averages out through the life of the mine and optimizing the plant to be able to recover at a given grade. So that the geology really here underpins the mine planning that both Karen, Go, and Tim will talk to, optimizing that mine path to really get the maximum recovery. So in this case, we're saying that the whole site is economic to mine, but it's only because you have these high grade portions that help balance the overall plant operations and mining operations. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ritchie.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
We've got Mr. Chase, who's operations now.
Welcome.
Thank you. Tom's left me a little bit open there. Am I able to use the whiteboard today?
Yes, you can certainly, but you have to do it in such a way that YouTube can see it.
That might be challenging.
So it's probably best to bring it around behind you if you're going to do that.
I might do it just to explain a little bit and to sort of expand on over that journal formation that Tom spoke about. But I will kick off with an introduction of myself. Tim Chase, I'm the GM mining, Westland Mineral Sands, and I've prepared a statement of evidence dated 9th of May 2025, covering operational matters for the proposed mineral sands mine. My qualifications and experience are set out in that statement of evidence. My role in relation to the application has been to provide advice on the methodologies to establish and operate a successful mining operation at the sites. This has included aligning mine design and equipment selection to suit the ore body present. Excuse me, I'm off the back of flu.
All right.
This has included aligning mine design with the equipment. That's quite core in designing mine equipment to suit the ore body, opposed to a lot of people make the error of trying to get the ore body to suit the mining plan. There are several factors that make the Mananui site suitable for mining. These include the approved mining permit, a significant resource at the sites, that both Mr. Mudgeway and Mr. Hardy have discussed earlier. And that the resource is well known, that the land is privately owned, pastoral farm, largely cleared, vegetation, and is owned by a WMS related company. The resource is well known due to exploration drilling dating far back as the early 1900s. The highest concentration resources along the eastern boundary, as Mr. Ritchie just spoke about, of that site. And in the company, we've excluded about 18% of the resource as a part of this application. And the exclusion of that 18% of the resource is quite significant when we look at from a volume perspective. 18% equates to about 3 years of mining and could be in excess of $250 million worth of revenue. That site's resource coming out of our mining area is really to avoid the Mananui wetland and the vegetation adjoining the wetland. The resource extends both above and below the water table, which means a method that can extract below water table mineral was necessary, and that being a dredge operation. So both the dredging and a digger-based excavation method was reviewed. The excavation using a digger is quite onerous, but also blind. You're digging under the water where you can't actually see where the bottom is. You're only guessing, you have spillages outside your bucket, so you're not really capitalising on the ore. Using a dredge that is GPS controlled base of ore, you can actually follow the base of ore quite clean.
Right. And is the idea of a dredge methodology because of the depth of the deposits here compared to, say, 9 Mile?
And also the water table. So the water table allows you to float a dredge quite cleanly on the water table without it bottoming out.
Right.
When 9 Mile, we were mining down to the water table, not below.
Yeah.
But the dredging option is the most efficient way of mining, especially when you're mining below water table.
Yeah.
I've outlined in my evidence, paragraph 17, why dredging was ultimately selected, because it has better outcomes in terms of hydrological function, controlled material recovery, and reduced mobile fleet as a result. The dredge mining methodology will use a floating self-propelled suction dredge. That will then pump run-of-mine material. That material will then be slurry pumped to a screen. It will be shore-based. That will take out the coarse oversize. Then the undersize will then be pumped to the wet concentrator plant.
Is this a mined dredge? A manned dredge?
Yes. The wet concentrator plant will then concentrate and take out the HMC, the heavy mineral concentrate. So that will then be extracted and then transported to port or offshore for the processing. The heavy minerals are predominantly the garnet and the ornites, as Mr. Hardy has alluded to. Tailings leftover sand will be slowly pumped back to the mining void to commence and support progressive rehabilitation. The benefits of dredge mining is that you're keeping everything wet, keeping it contained in a pipe. You're not using elevated surface stockpiles. You're keeping it all contained. You're getting it to the plant. You're processing it, and you're getting the tailings back to the pit. And that's all happening in real time. So you're not taking lots of water, storing lots of water on the surface. You're actually containing and utilising the water that's already in the ground.
Right. So in some ways, it's a lot more efficient than the 9 Mile operation.
Much.
So when you say it's pumped, it's actually in a pipe, or is it in a sort of conveyor?
No, in pipes. Yeah. So it's a pressurised pipe. It'll be HDP, high density polyethylene pipe, and it'll be pumped all the way back to the plant. As the dredge advances the dredge face, we extend the pipes and the pumps, and the plant stays in its fixed position. The reason the plant stays in its fixed position is that it allows the plant to not then follow the dredge all the way around the site, up and back, which is quite conventional in other dredge mining operations. The concentrator plant to fit on this size pond, we would need to have a pond 4 times bigger than what we're currently planning for, because we would need to allow room for the head feed line to get from the dredge to the concentrator, walkways, tailings distances, and we need to stage it so that we can get around corners to get both the dredge, 100 metres of head feed line and 100 metre long concentrator plant around corners, quite tricky. And this site, we're mining it in a south-north direction, and then turning at each end, having a long strike for 12 months, turning and going again. Leaving the plant situated in a central location allows us to have an even distance from each furthest distance to each corner, north or south. The plant stays static, and it's just a matter of pipelines and pumps, opposed to using yellow fleet trucks, loaders, diggers.
I ask you a silly question? Because you'll be able to answer this as your Australian experience. The density and quality of the sand is very good in these locations. But how does that give you a comparative advantage, say, compared to the Australian example, where you might say, oh yes, per cubic metre of volume, this sand is far superior to ours. But we've got 10,000 acres of low grade that we can shovel up. Is it the cost of extraction that makes the difference in terms of competitive advantage, or is there something about the composition that helps you in terms of the comparative advantage?
There's a factor of several. The first one that comes to mind is the depth. Here we have quite nice shallow ore bodies, but are deep enough to be quite strategic in their nature because they're quite high grade. The other benefit we have is that we don't have multiple layers or meters of overburden on the top.
Right.
Now those overburden meters are most expensive because that's not pay dirt. The pay dirt is the ore. What we're finding in most of our deposits up and down the coast, and this is one of our, I guess, a strategic advantage of New Zealand deposits, is they're quite young. Mr. Ritchie indicated they're around 10,000 years old. As a result of that, they're quite unaltered. They haven't been under very deep pressures, high pressures, high leaching of iron. So all of the crystals and the minerals are very clean.
Right.
Because we also have high rainfall events, anything that's soluble within our deposits has already been leached out. So we're not reliberating any of those soluble. The biggest key factor for here is that we have a very small amount of topsoil. We have virtually zero overburden and we're straight into our ore bodies. That makes it very competitive. When we start looking at some of other project proponents back in Australia, they're in excess of 30 metres of overburden they have to move to expose their ore.
Right.
That's very expensive to do.
Yeah, I see that. That's helpful. Thank you. I didn't visualise that point about how much depth you'd have to get through to get at it.
Yeah, it's quite just a scratch back and you're there, which makes it very easy for us to do sort of a cut and fill placement with our rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So the topsoil will come off in advance of the dredge pit. That will then get direct placed on the tails behind us. Because we don't have that expensive meterage of overburden, we don't have to have all of these rock piles we need to manage. And it really is just ore out, tailings back in, topsoil back on top.
Yeah, my simplistic understanding was, well, there's mountains of sand in Australia. How do you compete with that, even if it's got? But that makes
So the other thing
explains it.
So some of our other project proponents in Australia, their average head feed grade going into their plants is sitting between 2 and 5%. Ours is averaging somewhere between 29 and 39%. So extreme high grades compared to what we're seeing in Australia.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. It was a good question. The other one, which is probably right off the back of that, is what Mr. Ritchie was alluding to with regards to the journal formations. Why we see these concentrations also on the eastern side of this application site is because the ultra heavies drop out very quick. And hence that's why you've got more gold, that's why you've got more concentration of grade sitting on that eastern side. You referenced...
So are you saying that the concentration improves the extraction process? Is that what you're saying?
That because they're ultra heavies, that's why they've dropped out further up.
Yeah.
The lighter heavies have washed back.
Right.
You've had another concentration, then the light heavies have washed back.
So in fact, the natural processes have done something like what the
Correct.
machinery does.
Yep. And that brings me on to the next point is the way that we are mining and looking at mining from a southerly direction to the north is we're running a long strike. So if you can imagine each one of these grade strikes is a sand dune. Each one of them has a significant amount of grade. If you're mining along the strike, you're in consistent grade from south to north. When you turn around, you're in another grade layer of north to south. That's okay because you're running that line for about 12 months at a time. You adjust the plant settings so you maximise your recovery, you advance forwards. If you were to mine it in a different direction from, say, west to east, you're in high grade, low grade, high grade, low grade, each time you cut across one of these dunes. By running a cross strike, you're constantly with grades up and down through your plant. Now, trying to metallurgically balance that through your plant is almost impossible. By the time you indicate that you've got a high grade event coming through your plant, it's too late. You adjust the plants, that grade's already gone, and you're back into low grade.
Right, so the settings within the plant are completely different depending on grade.
Correct.
And if you're going in that direction, east to west, it's too many changes in a short period of time.
Yeah. And the factor of these projects to be viable also includes the recovery of the product. So the more we recover, the less chance that we have to remine or go back and then re-dig up tailings. It also prevents any future companies coming along, doing some drilling to say that these guys left behind 3 to 4% of the products, we want to remine it again and redistribute them. So by us going through their mine once, mine all, capture what we can, recover what we can, rehabilitate, finish.
So how important is that eastern part of the site economically for the viability of the whole scheme?
It's quite significant. And it's significant because there will be in the first 2 years of mining is your very high payback period. So ideally you'll start up in an area that has lower grade material, get all of your ducks lined up, make sure that your plant is operating to its full capacity before you then enter the high grade. Once you then enter the high grade, you're in quite a quick advanced payback period for your capital. And that's quite standard globally with projects that you'd start up right on the edge of your high grade zones, make sure that you've got all your plants dialed in before you then hit that high payback zone.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you land in a new area, you go for the high protein fat while you establish yourself before you take the lower hanging fruit, the high hanging fruit.
Exactly right. And the opportunity we have with that eastern side is that that's also where most of the gold is sitting as well, based on pioneering efforts.
And would it be uneconomical without it?
Good question. It probably would be economical, but you will probably be stripping back 30 to 40% of your revenue stream. Can I use the whiteboard?
Yeah.
Pin to behind. Yes, right.
As I spoke about in mining from the west to the east, you have grades that sit through the deposit like so. When you mine from the west, you're going through all these high grade strands, then you come in through a low grade patch, then high grade, then low grade, then high grade. When I talk about mining, and this is cool. When I talk about mining through from the south or north, you would mine through that strike, so you're getting this consistent grade all the way through. When we spoke about 9 Mile earlier and about the 2 different dunes that were set up, currently we're mining the second dune in, the ferry dune. The same thing applies here, is that when the oceans were up on this side, they were depositing and the heavies were dropping out and staying on this western side of the dune. The lighter heavies were blowing over when it was exposed. The lighter heavies were washing back when it was underwater. Hence the reason you have low grade zones in between your high grade zones. So these effectively are strand line deposits. In between, they're more like a basin style deposit.
Yeah. And when they call it the ferry line, is that this? Would they also describe the eastern escarpment area as the same ferry line, or not?
No, I wouldn't think so. I think that's more. I think that's the next dune in the old shoreline.
Right.
Yeah. So the mining sequence we've just covered, there's also an infographic on that mining sort of strike.
Yeah.
As you would see also in there that we have also stepped mining back from the eastern edge. And that does make up part of that 18% that we have sort of stepped back and taken out of our resource already.
Yes.
In the first 3 months, pre-mining works, first 3 months we'll make sure that we've got side entranceway from the main road, the state highway. Having that established first is so that our construction deliverables can take place.
I understand that that's going in before construction commences now, isn't it?
And then subsequent construction will then commence after that, which will last approximately 12 months. The mining sequences involved removal of vegetation where present, removal of topsoil. Topsoil stripping hours will only be done during daylight hours only. That will be done with a tractor style and scraper arrangement. That way we can profile the surface much better than just using excavator and trucks. And it's a one machine, one person operation. The dredge will remove approximately 200 to 220 tonnes an hour, maybe a little bit more of in situ ore material that will then pump up to a screen plant and then off to the concentrator plant as indicated earlier. The ROM pumps from the dredge to that screening unit, which will then have oversize component. That oversize will be direct placed back into the pond so that the gravel goes back in as where it was before it came out of the pit. Most of the gravels are sitting at the base of the ore. The -2 millimetre material will be then taken through to the plants, where the gravity separation will then take over. The gravity separation is as simple as Mr. Hardy explained earlier. It is really just static spirals. Water that runs over the spirals, the heavier, more dense product falling inside the spiral, the lighter heavies go to the outside and go back as tails.
So what's the main part of the plant that makes noise?
Noise,
Yeah.
pumps.
Pumps, right. And then that's like a diesel generator or electric?
No, it's electric pumps.
Right.
Yeah, so electric pumps, so they're driven by an electric motor, obviously.
So they're just sort of whirring away like a
So it's just a whirring noise. Now, the benefit of having all of your pumps, the way that we design the plant is to have all of the pumps at the ground level.
Yeah.
So your pumps aren't elevated up through the layers of the plant. Having them at ground level also then keeps that noise down.
In the screening, is that so? That's just a lot of like sort of moist liquid going through a screen. Does that make much of a noise?
It's silenced, so the screen itself gets silenced with a canopy.
Yeah.
Effectively, what it is a solid pipe of material, water and sand and gravel coming up from the dredge onto the screen. Oversize falls off the end. The fines go through into the tank and then the pump to the plant.
Right.
The oversize will build up, and then several hours a day, the loader will go there, pick up the oversize and put back into the tank. And that way that reduces the amount of mobile fleet that's required there at all times. I've detailed lighting as much as feasible in my evidence, paragraphs 49 to 52. By way of summary, all lighting will be minimised as much as operationally feasible, considering health and safety of our staff. The conditions of consent provide that lighting will be designed to not exceed 2 lux spill, horizontal and vertical, onto any adjoining property. Condition 17.1 will be subject to the Australian Government's National Light Pollution Guidelines for Wildlife, January 2020 or subsequent revision. Condition 17.2 to provide for lighting or condition 17.3 to 17.5. WMS has at every stage of the development of mining methodology made a concerted effort to design a proposal that is both operationally feasible and environmentally responsible. We consider that we have an opportunity here to run a profitable mining operation while giving back to the local and regional community. This intention has driven the operational design criteria and operational methodologies. A couple of other points raised by Mr. Hardy was around the Alpine Faults, and the Alpine Faults is the reason that we're all here. Without that fault, we wouldn't have these ore bodies up and down the West Coast. The West Coast is very significant and globally significant as far as what it contains. It gives us as a New Zealand company a competitive advantage over global markets. It allows us to also diversify up and down the coast. A part of that Alpine Fault is that it is also a ticking clock, and us building our deposits, our mining operations, our shipping operations on the West Coast builds resilience onto the West Coast, whether that's jobs, whether that's plant and equipment, whether that's fuel and train staff. So there's a lot more to it than just mining.
Yes, just one question. Just a question about your mine path and eastern boundary. So obviously there's this setback of mining. Yes, kind of something on that boundary. setback by drip line. Is that reflected in this design? Okay. Right, I can see the setbacks on the other boundaries, I just can't see the setback.
Yeah,
on the,
and Ms. Gale will also go into that more detail with the mine planning evidence that she'll provide.
Okay, thank you.
Couple of questions. So you talk about it being crucial that the plant has to operate 24 hours a day. Can you just sort of describe to me the reason why that is?
You've got an asset sitting there. You've got staff that you're paying for. To turn that asset off for 12 hours a day is a crazy use of your spend. To have an asset of that worth, you need to maximise its efficiencies. You need to maximise its runtime. The ability of turning these types of plants on and off is not an easy feat. You need to at least run for an hour each side to clear out all your slurry lines, to wash the plant out, and then also the same on the startup. So you need to get water back up, you need to get water balance through your plants. The intention of running these plants so that they're operational 85% of the time also allows you to have your water mass flows fully balanced from pits to product outputs, plants, the tails returning. The whole intent of having water coming out of the pit with slurry to the plant, water going back to the pit with slurry as tailings, allows that continual purging of water and slurry around. Every time you start and stop, things settle, and then you upset the balance for a little bit. When you start up again, you upset the balance for a little bit until it all then catches up. So to turn the plant on and off every 12 hours, you will effectively only be running for about 8 hours of the day.
Okay. And the maximum disturbance area that's about 27 hectares, which is quite a big portion of the site. I was just wondering, so why does it have to be so large? There's obviously a bit of contingency, I imagine, built into that, but you can just explain. And I suppose explain what's likely to be the area of disturbance.
Yeah, I would expect it would sit somewhere around 20 hectare. And the reason for that is these types of mining operations are elastic bands. You clear ahead of the mine face because you can't clear right at the front of the mine face because of safe distances from the advancing edge. You need to clear in advance. So you clear in advance, and then you've also got blocks of tailings that you're filling in behind you. So as you're clearing and advancing, your pit and your area disturbance opens up. Then you get a rehab done in a block, and then it closes. So you might go up to that 24 hectares, and then you'll bang in a whole heap of rehab that will then bring it back to the 18, 20.
Yeah.
A lot of that area is then taken up within your dredge pond. You don't want to close that too tight because if your tailings encroaches on you, or you have some difficulty in the digging in the front of the dredge face, all of a sudden your tails has advanced right up to behind the dredge, and all of a sudden your dredge is high and dry.
Yeah.
The ability also to have that area of disturbance allows us to do a direct placement of the topsoil to the tailings. We can actually strip the topsoil in advance and do some stockpiling. When the next blanket of tailings has been profiled and drained, we can then campaign that topsoil back on top of the tailings and then close that area out. The other thing that we're doing is leaving a drain down alongside of the dredge path. And the reason for that, and I'll draw a picture, it's quite easy to explain, is that when you're mining along strike, like I indicated, when you turn around and come back and you're mining back along tailings that you've already put into the pits, you either have to leave an intersecting data to hold that tailings back up, otherwise you'll remine the tailings again and will dilute the feed. So what we're intending of doing is leaving a drain open up as we mine. As we come back down, we come back through, that area then gets filled up and we create another drain on this next leading edge. The idea of doing that is we then don't sterilise all that intersecting data to hold the tails up. So we're actually taking that area out, leaving it open until we come back on the return path. So that return path, I call it a valley void. That also then takes your oversize that you're then taking from your screening unit. It also allows a drainage area. So for any catchments, they actually come down in the drain and are caught back into your pond. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's good. Next question on the electrification of the plant. So you state in the evidence that this is a decision for another day or until detailed design stage. I was just wondering, it's obviously quite an important decision why that's being left until then.
It really comes down to engineering, but then also supply availability. For the detailed design phase will then give us a full electrification raw loading. And then taking that back to the suppliers from the grid of what's actually available at the time. There is some competing volumes on the grid with other industries that are looking to expand. So we just wanted to make sure that we could leave both options open. So that drawdown or that demand wasn't able to be fulfilled with mains power, we could actually use generator power.
So it's a bit of a moving thing, and so a year's time, you don't actually know exactly how much power there's available on the grid, and you haven't designed the plant, so you don't know exactly how much you need. Right, okay. One of the landscape architect witness of the council talks about reducing the level of the plant. I think one of your team said that's not feasible, but no one's explained why. So I'd just like to hear from you as to why. Yeah, they've said drop it by 5 metres. And so could you explain why that's not feasible? Or
yeah, my first answer is I would love to make it shorter, because the higher we go, the more expensive it is. Now, what we're dictated through in heights is actually the capability of the spirals. Spirals need a certain amount of turns, so we need a certain amount of height. Those amount of turns that we require to get full separation of the mineral when it hits the top of the spiral, liberating itself away from the other minerals to know that this is heavy, that's light. If we make it too squat, we won't get that full separation of mineral. Then we'll be cutting off sort of medium grade material and then throwing a lot of it away. That really is determined by the spirals.
right, and I suppose what's the I think he's suggesting this, the floor level or the ground level of the plant. So you could have the plant with the same height, but you could have it. You can mine that underneath it and set the plant down. Why is that not feasible?
So we have looked at that in part. The problem with this is a wet plant. So everything that we're using there involves water. You then cut that plant 2 metres below natural surface. Our larger rain events that we get here on the West Coast, plus a plant that is a wet plant, it'll end up being a bath.
Yeah, so it's just concerned about water intrusion and management. Lastly, this may sound like a silly question, but the relocation of the forest or the direct vegetation direct transfer. When I first heard of that, I thought, oh, they're picking up and moving it. Is that possible to do that or not?
It is with some species, and I think that will be spoken to more with some of our other experts.
Yeah.
But it will depend on the species, I would expect, and also the size.
Yeah, okay. Very good. That's all for me.
What percentage downtime is there on the plant at 9 Mile?
We budget for about 85% operational runtime. Currently, we're sitting around 92% runtime, which is higher than industry average. Industry average is about 85%.
Right. And what sort of staff, engineering staff, do you have to operate to keep that percentage?
So operators. So we have a maintenance team that are working Monday to Friday and on call 24/7. And then we have our operational staff, obviously 24/7. So the maintenance requirements are quite low because everything's quite robust. So, the pumps are very, very strong, hardened steel casings because the product we're talking about being garnet and ilmenite is very abrasive. So our maintenance team do work quite well, but it is a very programmed maintenance regime that we have. And that way we are able to maintain above 85% combined utilisation of other.
Right.
And it's mainly fitters and turners,
Yeah.
pump fitters and electricians.
On the northern border of the 9 Mile site, I think there was going to be vegetation planting to screen. How's that gone?
Yep, so that's in place. So there's a bund there in place and it's been cleaned up. And we've also done a second bund at the request of a local resident, further advance of that again, just as a secondary precaution.
Right. And that planting is taken?
It has taken, and I think the luxury that we have with the high rainfall events here is, our strike rate for plants is quite good.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
I was going to suggest that before we call the next, it might be the afternoon break. Is that?
Let's have an afternoon break for 15 minutes.
Who's next?
Ms. Go will be online. She's the line planner. What's that right?
Hi Alex, can I do a sound check? Can everyone hear me?
Can hear you.
Just a quick, I'll start look at your evidence, starting at paragraph 11 in your table 1, looking at the mineral resource estimate.
Yep.
So the full mining area there is both the dark brown part of that figure and also the orange part on the boundary. So in part, we've got mining within 100 metres of Te Whare wetlands. Just want to confirm that.
Okay, so just to clarify, the brown area is the area that we are going to be mining. We are proposing to mine, which is known as the mining area. Then you've got that sort of creamy beige sort of coloured. That's the total mining area that is includes areas that are within 100 metres of the wetlands. So we're saying that we will be mining outside of 100 metres. So we're not going to. We've actually excluded resources that are within 100 metres of the boundary.
Okay.
Can I just clarify? If it's all right. Yeah. So Karen, I think in terms of just looking at your image, you've got your total mining area, which has the brown edge on it.
Yes.
All the way up to the blue edge. So that is the mined area. But the light coloured brown, is that not within the 100 metres from the setback? So it's demonstrating that there's parts of the mining area that would be within 100 metre setback from the wetland.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think there's a clearer map, and it may be that Ms Crawford, who prepared the map, is able to explain that. But if you look at tab 18 of the graphics bundle, that might be the easier map to understand.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's been a yellow dotted line put around the wetland to really clearly show that 100 metre setback. The orange line is to the edge of where we're mining, but the green is where it's going to be replanted at the end. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's currently pasture.
Got that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
But I appreciate that that doesn't quite look right.
No, that's actually fine. That makes more sense. I think Ms Campbell's dimensions help explain that. Thank you.
Yeah, I got a bit stuck in there too.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Ms Go, just one question from me. I'm familiar with the 9 Mile site.
Yep.
Because I heard that application. How is the rehabilitation going in terms of the calculations that you made for the rehabilitation of the Ferry Dune?
Yeah, really, really good. So for 9 Mile, I've been tracking. So we do a a survey of the progressive rehab and also the mining area every fortnight, so every 2 weeks. So I've just been tracking in terms of what I had designed to the final landform versus what we've actually placed, and we're pretty close. And I can send you some cross sections if you want to have a look.
It would be useful to have a couple of cross sections just to identify and then also provide them to Mr. Chase, who'll be on the helicopter, to actually point where those cross sections are.
Mhm.
So I can just have a visual of, you know, before and after, or anticipated and so forth. Because it was quite a sophisticated, you were predicting quite high levels of accuracy of replication of original form, if I can put it that way. So it's interesting to hear that you're achieving that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's all to do with when we have good information and you can actually run good sort of production schedules, you're able to actually sort of say, okay, this is how much tailings we're going to be placing back into the pit. And so straight away that gives you that ability to actually get up to those heights that you actually need to be. Yeah.
No, that's my only question. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. I'm just going to retrieve my glasses that I think are in the
Thank you, Ms. Go.
Thank you.
offshore shipping. So for the mining operations, I've calculated indicated range of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions of between 1,100 tonnes and 5,500 tonnes, depending on the equipment type and power supply that Mr. Chase had previously referred to. And the total mining emissions are somewhere between 0.0015 and 0.0073 of total New Zealand greenhouse gas emissions on a carbon dioxide equivalent basis. And I've also calculated the potential emissions from transport. So using the route via the Port of Greymouth, it's approximately 1,040 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And that's significantly less than truck transport to the East Coast on Nelson, which ranges between 3,800 and just over 5,000 tonnes per annum. And I've also been involved with the community liaison group at 9 Mile, and it's provided a regular formal feedback forum for the local residents. And CRG was required to meet quarterly, but through agreement, we now only meet on a 6-monthly basis, and proposing the establishment of CRG for Mananui as well, as it's a valuable formal process that works well.
Thank you very much.
Just one question. Thank you, Regan. Just a question around, so the proposal post-mining is to reinstate existing drainage on this site. Indirect drainage back towards constructed wetlands on the eastern.
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to the extent at the 9 Mile operation, you were using things like sediment traps and the like to polish over land flow.
Yes, yeah, and to treat water from, yes.
So those form part of the 9 Mile package, is that right?
We use sediment ponds, but the water is not discharged off site, it is recirculated within our process plant. Right, so it's recycled.
So that's sediment ponds, but actual within drainage channel sediment traps, do you use those? That design?
Not directly, because it's quite a small site.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Couple of questions. Just interested to know how the community liaison group's going. Us planners often oppose those groups, but don't hang around to see how they actually work. So it'd be interested to get your info on that.
So it's going really well. It's been a really good forum for the local residents to bring stuff to us formally to discuss them. You know, they've talked around transport issues. You know, we've talked around how things are operating and what the concerns are. We had a few minor concerns around trucking, and we've sort of, you know, one of them was moving an operational speed limit to actually lower the speed limit outside someone's house, which made a huge difference to the impact they were hearing from the trucks. But I think it works well as a forum, and it gives them a good formal process to work through and talk to these people.
How do you manage sort of disagreements?
We generally talk about it, provide more information.
Right. Yeah.
And I say in the case of the issue with the so we basically moved with a 25k limit coming around the corner into the mine, which we basically moved a few hundred meters out for the trucks, which reduced the noise completely for that resident. Right. You know, I think we would definitely try and walk through things.
Yeah, very good. Another question, I'm just sort of conscious that, you know, it's a reasonably complicated consent as far as that goes. Management plans and obviously there's some conditions on this consent saying that, you know, the staff on site have got to be made aware of the consent conditions and the presence of the management plans. But I'm just sort of wondering, due to the complexity of it, you know, is there any training going to be given to staff about how to resolve some of these issues? And like even like the sediment erosion and control plan is quite detailed and quite, you know, require quite a good skill set to be able to pick up some of those non-compliances. What sort of training do you have envisaged?
So I guess where we work with training, it's providing it through an overview of the site through inductions and so that everyone's got a broad overview of how it happens, and then more specifically with, say, your earthworks supervisors, your mine managers, as we going through stuff with them individually, but then also someone like myself doing auditing of what's actually happening to make sure that we are doing what we said we'd do in the plans.
Right, and is that sort of, is there any, or would you be happy with training being part of the conditions? Because at the moment,
Yeah.
that sort of reads that we're going to make our staff aware of it, which doesn't strike me as being particularly requiring too much effort.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think if formal training wouldn't be a bad thing necessarily, but I think covering it off with your staff and your mine manager who's providing daily and hourly instructions to the people undertaking the task, you know.
And there's just a few ones. I mean, how would you know? Like, there's quite a bit of importance for the pump from the pit to the infiltration trench.
Yeah.
In terms of making sure the hydraulic gradient's away from the east.
Yeah.
How would you know if that actually stops working?
So, as I understand it, the dredge would have a GPS, so we'd have a constant pond level readout from the water level in the pond to know if that's one way or other, and then that would be backed up with the sort of weekly and monthly monitoring of the other wells as well.
Right. I suppose, you know, what I'm interested in seeing is, you know, is there a process in place to make sure that if that pump does stop working and that hydraulic, and it causes a hydraulic change, that, you know, that the staff on site may be aware of it, so at least they can, you know, address that situation. And I'm not sure what the solution is. It's an operational matter, but that's potentially an issue I see.
Yeah.
There's nothing there in the conditions to say that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I maybe need to talk to Mr. Chase around, but I guess what we'd have is we'd have the only thing that would be, if we had a breakdown with the dredge, we're going to stop pumping tailings, which is where the additional water would come that would upset that water balance.
I think it wasn't a breakdown of the dredge. It was what was proposed as a rebalance and taking the water from the pond to the trench.
Yeah,
that was all proposed to make sure that hydraulic gradient maintained direction away to the west.
I think in a practical,
it wasn't a lot of water, but it was a crucial amount of water.
I think in a practical sense, what that would be was we'd have a maximum relative level for the water in the process pond, in the dredge pond, and if it went above that would set an alarm off for the operator that it needs to be investigated.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and potentially use an additional pump if we needed to do that.
Yeah, well, that'd be something that we.
Can I just add
here back on?
Might add some value to that conversation is around the dredge GPS system, be a constant monitor of the pond surface level. Having that connection in that trench also is following the dredge pond. So where you have a dip in the water, the westerly flow and easterly flow, the trench and the pond are on the same journey, same path. So there wouldn't be a separation between the two.
Right. No, I'm not sure I understand that, but what it seemed to rely on was a pump, and if that pump stopped working, then there would be an issue.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'll
maybe.
Mr. Rika tomorrow.
Maybe something to come back to. Yep. That's all from me.
I just have some questions around the concept of ecological remediation.
Yeah.
Have you had conversations and dialogue with Dr. Keesing around this concept?
Yes, I have.
So would you be the primary person responsible for implementation of the project under his direction, or?
Yeah, that's how yeah.
So if I could just ask you to have in front of you tab 18 of the booklet, and also appendix 3 to the landscape and visual mitigation revision 1.
Have we on there? What's that on?
18.
Rather, yep. That's the one that you think then.
Page 5. Item 3, landscape mitigation.
That one is also in here. Just use that in front of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, figure 18 shows two boundaries with yellow dotted lines.
Yeah.
The first is the, I think, 10-metre boundary from the wetland in the adjacent scenic reserve. And the other, I think, is a 100-metre boundary from the wetlands around Tuparapari. Is that your understanding?
This is the first time I've seen Plan 18, so I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. But it does say there's a 100-metre natural wetland setback.
Yeah, so it may be that
Yeah.
it may be that the 100-metre for the little wetland is the separation for that little circle as well. But the mining area means it goes within 10 metres, I think, is how close they get to that one. But as I understand it, the black line on the eastern boundary is the eastern edge of the mining area. And at various points along that axis or that line, there is an encroachment into the 100-metre separation distance. You see that?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first question is, if you look at the plan called Landscape Mitigation Plan, page 5, which is the other plan shown to you, you'll see in the legend it has a thing called vegetation rehabilitation plus VDT, which I think stands for something direct, vegetation direct transfer.
Yep.
And my question is, what within the eastern boundary and that yellow line drawn there, there is also areas that are not shown in the legend as vegetation rehabilitation, but have angled green areas. Do you know what they are?
So is it the wetland area that we're talking about?
No, so you imagine the east, you see the line called eastern boundary? So that's going to be, as I understand it, the future eastern boundary of the site. The rest of everything east of that is going to be protected. So that is a boundary, not a mining area boundary, but a future title boundary or a protection boundary, right?
Yeah.
So within the eastern boundary, beyond the eastern boundary going east are areas, is the area to be rehabilitated at the edge of Te Wharewhare, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And there are both wetlands, 2 in number specifically within this area. There are in fact 3, but there's 2 within that area.
Yeah.
There is an area in the legend described as vegetation rehabilitation, based on the legend, which is the lighter green with the hatching. But there is also shown a green with a oblique hatching, or sorry, an oblique hatching as opposed to the, you see what I'm saying? There's different greens.
Greens, yeah.
And what are those differences denote?
I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, looking at this map, it looks like it's the 3DT is what we're proposing, which is the dark green strip. And then if you look at the legend, it says additional grassed area, or the lighter green with the oblique hatching.
Where does it say that?
So that's at the bottom of the left-hand table in the E.
Which one?
Oh, this is, I think, the latest version. So this is, I think, a later version.
There will be an updated version because the earlier version didn't reflect the areas that we talked about originally.
This is version 2, isn't it?
Well,
On my version 2, page 29 of the PDF is this landscape mitigation plan.
if you look at 12, tab 12, that will be the latest plan. But I think you're still referring to that. The different areas denote the makeups that Dr. Keesing requires to ensure an appropriate planting program. And that's specified in consent conditions in terms of how much needs to be broadleaf podocarp forests to the point of self-sustaining vegetation cover of 80%. And then he's got other different species requirements. And so I think...
It doesn't seem, sorry to interrupt you, but that doesn't seem to... It doesn't seem to be the diagonally lighter green. I can't think of the phrase.
You're talking about the additional grassed area? So some of that will be grass, which
Will be grass.
in the conditions, yeah. So in 9.11, when we talk about formally protect an ecological reserve, it also includes 1.53 hectares, 2.24 hectares of just grassed area, which is the edge.
Right.
Yeah, is that what you're talking about?
Well, I don't know. I wanted to just see what was being proposed there.
Yeah.
You're saying it's have it grass.
The key on the left-hand column down at the bottom, additional grassed areas, but we can clarify with Dr. Keesing, but it's got additional grassed area.
Do you think that's the same cover? Okay.
Can I just make a clarification? So there has been some changes between the landscape plan that was issued with the landscape assessment and the landscape plan that was issued with the evidence. And I think the issue is that, Commissioner, you're looking at the one that was issued with my assessment versus the one Duncan is looking at is the one that was issued with my evidence. And so the colours actually have been changed slightly for comparity. And the answer to that question of what you're looking at is grass.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Well, I suppose this is a question for Dr. Keesing about when he comes about why the idea of grass as opposed to planting.
Yeah.
But your answer is you're not over that detail. Is that what you're saying, or?
In terms of the specific plan, yes. In terms of the 4.75 hectares of rehabilitated by DVT, I am aware of that, and that's what I understood.
Okay, so coming to then the practical implementation of this. As I understand it, what year in the mining sequence do you get to the remnant forest areas? Do you know?
So I would need to look at the updated mine path. I think we're probably at least 18 months and possibly year 2.
Year 2.
Yeah.
Year 2 of a total of what? 12 years? Roughly. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're doing the first cut, you're not actually moving any remnant forest?
Along the eastern boundary.
Yeah.
I think we will need to trim some of the remnant forest to get the main path. Yeah.
Would there be any DBT at that point?
So I think practically we will have to stockpile some material until we'll be able to be behind us.
And when you come to the forest, is it intended like the mining path is not entirely the entire remnant, but are they planning to just take sections of the remnant forest off sufficiently wide for the mine cut, or are they going to say, right, now we've encountered a piece of forest?
Yes, yeah.
How does that work in practical terms?
So I guess we haven't fully planned how that rehab work might, but I think it would be driven by, the clearing would be driven by the ability to have somewhere to direct transfer that to. So if we've got a larger area behind us, then clearing the width of those remnants would make practical and good mining sense.
Right. I'm just, maybe Dr. Keesing has a better conceptualization of how that will work, but is there any work that you could do to prepare the land once the first cut closest to the eastern boundary of the mining area is completed to receive the plants that are going to come directly from the forest area? That's
so when we do that DVT, we will be transferring all the topsoil onto the new land.
right.
So in terms of preparation, it's probably all just in that movement of all the material.
Right. So it's not a thing you're doing in the first year or two. You'd wait until you encountered that and then take all the soil from where the forest is. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah.
And in terms of the formation of the wetlands, does that occur pretty soon after the first mining year or something? Is that how it starts, or?
Yeah, so we would form the shape of the wetlands as we mine through it, but what we wouldn't do is they would still be, if you like, cut off from the Tūwhare and the rest of the wetlands.
Yeah.
And that would allow us to establish vegetation, because when you're building constructed wetlands, you need to actually let the plants establish so they actually provide some benefit without, discharging straight away.
So, do the conditions work in such a way that the formation of this protected area occurs or commences reasonably early after the destruction of the thing? So there's no sort of major delay.
No.
So we're talking about, and are these going to be transferred, the big items, the kakatea and all of that, it's all going to be transferred? Is that how it's going to work?
So no, and Dr. Keesing can talk to this a bit more, but the plan would be to chop the larger trees down and transfer them as part of your material, but we'd be focusing on transferring this shrubby trees.
Oh, so there's no direct transfer of the main species.
Not of the big trees, no, it's just not practical.
And so why can't they be planted earlier, or is that possible or not? Like if you're going to plant seedlings as opposed to,
because we're relying on the topsoil material within the forest to do that direct transfer, and that way we get all the seed source, and I've seen it quite effective on the site. You get the trunks as a micro habitat to allow things to self seed.
Right. Okay.
If it assists, Dr. Keesing is all across this, and we've designed the time plan deliberately to enable exactly what you're talking to, but poor Mr. Ross wasn't part of those conversations.
I apologise. We are going to have to be over them when the site.
Correct.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely right.
Thanks. All right. Well, you can see we're struggling with a number of boundaries, so we're just trying to spatially understand it. But that's very useful. Thank you, Mr. Ross. And you did actually answer those questions very well.
Didn't feel like that, but yeah.
You haven't been over those conversations. You just thought about it. All right. Well, sorry, I got distracted.
No, that's all right. It's Sounds quite fascinating. I look forward to Dr. Keating talking about it, because they do put all the material in, but in different forms. We are now, we've got Mr. Fuller on traffic. We're going to run early today, but I was going to suggest that instead of still working through, so we'll have Mr. Farron next, and instead of working on to Mr. Rika and Dr. Fitzpatrick, because of the Ngāi Tahu tabled letter, which is substantial, we'd like them to present tomorrow once they've had an opportunity to review the comments in that, if that's all right. Yeah. So I can either arrange for one of the other experts to bump up today, or we can just.
Well, I think we'll just adjourn early. I think we've done well. I don't have any anxiety about times.
Okay.
And as you say, your team needs to discuss that material. And I don't like having people work late at night if I can avoid it. Oh, welcome, Mr. Farron. I think you're sitting in the wrong place, but it's fine.
Well, this is Mr. Fuller, and I'm more than happy to sit there.
What did I call you?
Mr. Farron.
He's neat. Yeah.
So I'll start with paragraphs 5 of my summary, if that's okay. Yeah. So the activity is predicted to generate 35 truckloads of material per day, which equates to 70 truck and trailer movements per day, an average of 3 movements per hour. Trucking is proposed to occur over a 24-hour period. The following limitations are proposed regarding truck movements associated with the activity. A maximum of 70 truck movements per day, averaged over a 1-week period, and a maximum of 6 truck movements per hour. When accounting for staff and occasional visitors, the traffic generation of the proposed activity is predicted to be a maximum of 48 vehicle movements per hour, so that's 6 truck and trailer movements plus 42 light vehicle movements, occurring at 700 hours and 1900 hours, and a total of 235 vehicle movements per day, 70 truck and trailer movements plus 165 light vehicle movements. All parking and loading will occur on site, so there will be no off-site effects associated with these matters. The proposed access arrangement has been designed as an intersection and has been refined through discussions with the NZ Transport Agency to address concerns raised in their submission. I consider that the site access will operate safely and efficiently. I have considered the effects of traffic generated by the proposed activity on the wider transport network, including the route to the Port of Greymouth. I consider that the increase in traffic is sufficiently low that it remains within the capacity of the network. And specifically around the New Zealand Transport Agency submission, I note that the New Zealand Transport Agency has provided a letter to the West Coast Regional Council indicating their concerns have been adequately addressed, subject to minor wording changes to the proposed conditions. I understand that those changes have been adopted. I can continue to support the proposal from a transport engineering perspective. Thank you.
Yes, so just a couple of questions. Actually, so I'll start with the first question, which is in 5 of your summary. And I'll start by saying that maths is not my strong point, so I'll apologise for that. You've talked about a maximum of 70 truck movements per day, averaged over a 1-week period. And obviously the averaging issue was an issue of concern with some of the submitters.
Yeah.
So with a maximum of truck movements per day, what is the rationale behind having a 1-week average?
It allows for some flexibility, I suppose, should there be a need to undertake additional trucking, and that flexibility, I suppose, could relate to maybe there's potential issues at the port where they can't take material to the port for some reason for a period, so then they'll be able to catch up, or perhaps there's roadworks or something like that going on, again, giving them the ability to catch up.
So how does that work in relation to the maximum number of trucks per day? I mean, obviously you can't go beyond. You've talked about a truck movement is 1 in, 1 out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, a truck movement is either in or out.
Yeah.
How does it? I suppose the way that it will end up working is that, yeah, I mean, because it's an average over a 1 week period, there will be days in which they will be able to do more trucking than other days. But I suppose that they would get to a point where, let's say they just went all out at the start of the week and really went for both the maximum hourly number of truck movements, then they would get to a point where there would be no more trucking for the remainder of that week. Because it would need to still meet that 70 truck movements per day averaged over that 1 week period.
Okay, so I'll leave that point there, I think. And finally, just a question just about the wider network effects. I know one of the submitters has mentioned there's not heavy truck bypass through Ruatapu.
Yeah.
So all traffic has to go through the street.
Yes. Right. I mean, it's, from my perspective, it's a state highway. That's what state highways are intended to accommodate trucks. I don't think that either the 3 truck movements per hour on average or the maximum of 6 is such a scale that it leads me to having safety or efficiency concerns.
No, that's all I'm here to ask. Thank you.
Just a number of small questions, really. Just first carrying on from Mr. Commissioner Earle's questions, how will the council realistically monitor the number of vehicle movements per day, given they're averaged over the week? It's potentially quite tricky.
There is a requirement. I'm trying to recall whether, I think it might sit in the conditions. There is a requirement for the applicant to keep a log of truck movements. I can't quite remember the wording, whether it's that they've got to they have to report those back, or whether they have to be made available to the council on request.
Would it be useful for those records, these records? Provide evidence of exactly what's happened.
I mean, I suppose they could be. Sorry, I guess my thinking there is just how a GPS record then gets reported back. I mean, if GPS is the way that they choose to monitor it, I imagine that there'd be a way within GPS software to set up a gate or something and sort of say, okay, every time it crosses, let's say the site boundary, it comes in, that's one movement, and then it crosses that boundary and goes out, that would be a second movement. I suppose that's a method of doing it. Other sites, let's say more traditional aggregate sites, tend to need to weigh vehicles as well to have an understanding of how much product's on each of the tracks. I can't recall if there is a weighbridge. There is a weighbridge at this site, so weighbridge records might be a method of doing it.
I suppose it doesn't mean, even though they've got the flexibility of having more traffic movements at any given time, is that operationally viable, given that it's sort of like it's a constant process?
I would have to defer to somebody else on the applicant team as to how the material is output and the ability to stockpile it.
Right.
Sorry.
No, that's all. And just turning to the farm access, I think you referred to as crossing 18. Is that going to be closed? I was a little bit unsure whether that was being closed off by condition or not.
Sure. The existing farmhouse access is being retained, and that will be retained to maintain access to the farm through the duration of the mining, and then I understand it will be retained in the long term as well once the mining's been complete.
So that's number 18, is it? Is that crossing 18? I think it's down in your evidences.
Yes, if that's sorry.
There is another farm access, isn't there?
There is a farm access towards the south, so I'm just going to have a look for TA's comments. Sorry, crossing point 18 is being closed.
It is, right.
It is. The bund will go across crossing point 18, and that effectively closes it. It's already got a grass berm there, so NZTA was satisfied that they didn't need to do anything to sort of change the roadside environment from looking like an access. And my understanding from those discussions with NZTA is that it's just a matter of paperwork at their end that sort of formally closes access from their perspective, because it is a limited access.
Well, there's one of the conditions, is it?
I don't think they wanted anything on that, actually. I think they was just satisfied that the funds was going across it. Sorry, is this the latest?
You don't think there's anything on the condition?
No, they hadn't asked for anything because they were satisfied with the construction of the bund that physically prevents that access, and that everything from there on in was an in-house NZTA process rather than something that the applicant could control or have input into.
Yeah, then well, that makes sense to me. And I was a little bit curious with the NZTA right turning bay from the south as to why that was required, because I didn't expect too much traffic to be coming from the south, but unless they know something I don't know.
No, I was not surprised. I've had it on a separate project where even if there's the potential that somebody lives down to the south and they want to come up and turn right in, NZTA are going to take that opportunity to provide that in the safest manner possible. So I am certainly not really aware of any need for trucks and to come from the south. I would have expected most people to live sort of Hokitika to the north, just because that's where the bigger urban areas are. But I suppose NZTA's perspective, it doesn't preclude somebody from living down south who wants to turn up, who will work here and turns up.
I suppose it future-proofs if in the event the other farm to the south gets up and running.
Potentially.
Yeah. Just another question on queuing. So you mentioned that one truck could stop in that vehicle crossing or entrance right at the front of the site. Could it accommodate any more than that if the trucks do get grouped?
As in trying to depart the site?
Yeah.
Yes. I was trying to recall where the gate sits, actually.
So I couldn't see that on your drawing whether it could accommodate 2 more trucks.
I suppose from where I'm looking at it at the moment, it can accommodate a truck waiting. And I guess the key matter is when it arrives, having trucks queue within the site isn't ideal, but it's not really going to lead to an offside effect.
Is there any reason why a truck would be queued there anyway? But
on the departure?
Well, on the arrival.
Tab 13,
On the arrival.
No, only if it is at a gate and whether the site's been secured at that gate location.
Okay. So there's probably no, I mean, if it was due, the gate should be open, shouldn't it?
I would have thought so. And I guess in a general sense, I would have expected that, again, I suppose talking about an average of 3 trucks an hour, you might get one go out, 2 come back. So in theory, they should be spaced well apart. And I'm imagining that, well, I suppose I'm anticipating whatever happens at the port, there would be a bit of a process to go through there, and that you wouldn't wind up in a situation where you get 2 trucks departing the port at a closely spaced interval.
Okay. And with the potential transport of muck out onto the road, what's the situation there in terms of how you're hoping to minimise that? It is a wet site, isn't it? So I suspect there will be quite see whether they're dealing with that in the sediment control.
I double check. I talked about this in the transport assessment, but what it should be is the access should be sealed for a distance, and it typically takes. Typically, we sort of assume that having 15 metres of sealed access is sufficient to shake off that kind of material. I suppose there's other processes that could be gone through, such as some sites have wheel washers, some sites just have internal judder bars just to help shake that off. But certainly the way that it's been designed to date has got a segment of seal back from the state highway that is consistent with what I would consider be sufficient to shake off the majority of, if it has got mud or any other material on it, that should all come up within the site.
A section of seal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how does that work in terms of it? That wouldn't promote shaking, would it?
No, it's just literally just as the wheels sort of spin, that they tend to just naturally deposit material within that space. So yeah, currently it's saying that it's going to be sealed approximately 20 metres beyond the site gate, and the site gate itself was set back into the site at a reasonable distance. Sorry, which bit? Yeah, so I think that's pretty much the crux of it. There will be a reasonable length of seal in which that should, that's what I think, should naturally come off well.
And in terms of cycle safety, do you think the transport management plan, would it be appropriate to reiterate the safe passing distance for cyclists? And then I know we sort of talked about this in the Barrytown job, and I think it did reiterate that. I didn't see it in this one. I was surprised, I suppose.
I see no harm in adding that again as a specific matter to be set out in the transport management plan. There are a couple of sections there that sort of reiterate to truck drivers, regular visitors, employees that they can expect to encounter cyclists, as well as be aware of pedestrians and other road users. But to reiterate the safe cycle passing distance, I don't see that as being an issue in terms of including that.
Oh, that's all good. That's all for me. Very comprehensive. For me.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time. All right, so I've just got a couple of questions regarding plans, if I can. Close out the day. So,
sorry, can I say we've got Mr. Farron as well today?
Oh, we have.
Yeah. There's a slight shuffling of the experts to be able to accommodate Mr. Rika and Dr. Fitzpatrick.
You may have explained that. I apologise if I missed it.
I may start from my paragraph 5, my summary. So my assessment shows that noise levels from the activity will comply with the proposed daytime and nighttime noise limits of 55 and 45 decibels respectively. The noise limits have been derived through reference to the permitted activity standards in both the Westland District Plan and the proposed Taiwan retaining plan, in addition to the noise criteria set out in New Zealand Standard 6802 and World Health Organization published guidance for the protection of residential amenity. Since the application was lodged, the applicant has provided a reduced schedule of mobile equipment to be used during the mineral extraction and processing. This has resulted in lower noise emissions from the site compared to those described in the noise report that accompanied the application. For the majority of the time, noise emissions will comply with the district plan permitted activity standards. However, with reference to the Westland District Plan, activities on site have the potential to exceed the 45 decibel noise limit that applies on Sundays and public holidays, and between 1800 and 1900 hours on Saturdays. Noise emissions from the site will comply with the DTPP permitted activity noise limits at all times, except for the 1 hour period between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock on weekends and public holidays. The existing daytime noise environment at the nearest dwellings is predominantly influenced by traffic on State Highway 6. At night, traffic and surf noise are notable noise sources. Ambient noise levels at the nearest properties to the site are in excess of the noise environment anticipated by the permitted activity standards set out in the district plan. During the day, I expect that mining activities will only just be audible during lulls in traffic. At night, Noise may be audible when excavation is occurring at the closest point to dwellings. However, noise levels from the site will be below the World Health Organization guidance at all times, permitting residents to sleep at night with windows open. I've provided suggested text for consent conditions that include recommended noise limits for the construction and operational phases of the project, and the adoption of noise mitigation that includes 3-meter high noise control bands and setback distances from existing dwellings. My calculations assume a conservative worst case with all mining plant and equipment operating at the same time at the closest practical points to existing dwellings. In practice, and for most of the time, noise levels will be lower than predicted when mining is occurring in other parts of the site away from the boundaries. A further implication of my conservative assessment and the reduced quantity of equipment is that the proposed setback distances may not be required in practice. For example, if an electric power dredge is used on site, it will be quieter than the diesel engine dredge I have assumed. I consider noise effects from the proposal will be less than minor and will result in acceptable noise amenity at the nearest dwellings with respect to the World Health Organization guidance and NZS 6802, the Westland District Plan and the TTPP permitted activity noise levels and the existing noise environment.
Okay. Yeah, that's several questions, thanks. On paragraph 23 of the evidence,
sorry, I might just say that I just noticed when reading through my evidence that the decibel, the dB, metric that I rely on has been changed to a capital I. So you may notice that you're reading through evidence. The numbers are sort of exactly the same, just the decibel values.
I didn't notice it. So in that paragraph, you talk about the noise monitoring was carried out on a calm day, and you obviously you talk about the presence of surf noise. I'm just wondering, on a normal day, and I'm conscious that it is, this thing here is quite rough normally. What would be the background noise, or how much higher would it be on a normal day?
It's a bit of a variable noise environment, but it could be easily 5 decibels noisier during surf conditions, and that's generally most noticeable at night when there's less traffic around and the surf becomes the dominant noise source.
So in some ways, your background noise assumption is quite conservative.
Very so, yes.
Can you talk about the masking of noise? I just want to explore that.
Yes.
You talk about the traffic and the surf noise, and you've also got the mine noise. And so is that noise going to be just the same, like sound pressure or level of noise, or is can the human ear actually differentiate between the two? That makes sense.
I think it will be different depending on the time of day. So depending on the location. So the dwellings that will be potentially the highest, greatest noise effects from noise would be those dwellings closest to the site, and they're also closest to the state highway. So during the day, when you have a vehicle passing, you can hear the noise environment as you hear the vehicle coming, and you can hear it for quite some time. The vehicle passes and then disappears, and then another vehicle might come within earshot of that. So in that environment, the site will not be audible. The traffic will dominate. If
so does it actually block the noise, or it's just so if you've got two different noise sources at the same level, does the human ear actually hear them both, or does one block the other?
The human ear may hear them both depending on the pitch of both, but in this case, the noise from the mineral sands extraction is so much lower than the traffic noise level that it won't be audible at all during the day. At night, when there is less traffic, and in the sort of conservative surf noise assessment that I assumed, the site may just be audible in those lulls between traffic.
So when there's discussion about respite, and so And so, what you're saying potentially is that there is actually respite during the day from this noise because it won't generally.
Yeah, so the comment about respite was from the peer reviewer, and they were suggesting, in my understanding, that it was to replicate the existing district plan permitted activity levels on Sunday, which is a 45 decibel limit to provide respite. In my view, because of the traffic passing the site, that 45 decibel limit is already being greatly exceeded by the traffic noise. So there is no potential for respite if the site were not to operate on Sundays or operate at a reduced level on Sundays. Because the traffic noise level is already elevated beyond that.
That's good. Now you talk about the New Zealand Standard 68002, and that standard talks about a greater degree of protection may be appropriate than provided by the guideline when local conditions and community expectations are taken into account. And so the question to you, is there any local conditions or community expectations that are relevant in this case?
I think what the standard is referring to there is that you can take into account a district. It's up to the district to set its own limits. But what we're seeing is that the existing Westland District Plan limits are being revised through the TTPP process, and that respite 45 decibel limit on Sundays is being withdrawn, or that's the proposal anyway, is to have a 55 decibel limit on Sundays, like I've been proposing as part of this application.
Is there any local conditions like the density of development, that's sort of rural residential development, would they have different expectation than rather than a busy city or suburban versus urban?
Not the district plan doesn't make that delineation. It provides that same noise limit for whatever the residential situation is, and that also reflects the World Health Organization guidance that they seem to be following.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the World Health Organization standards and the standard, you referenced those. What times does nighttime start under those standards? It just wasn't clear from the evidence because obviously there's a slightly different time frame, isn't there, between the
different time frames.
District plans.
So the New Zealand Standard 6802, the time frames are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for day, and then 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. for night. And then under the World Health Organization, they generally regard night as starting at 2300, 11 p.m. So it's a 1 hour extension of daytime.
Okay. And you're going to 10. That's right, isn't it?
That's when the noise limits are proposed, but in practice, the site will be extracting so that the noisier part of the activity will be occurring from 7 to 7.
That's right. Yeah. Just some truck noise. So have you actually estimated the truck noise at the closest dwelling? And I know there's a sort of planning argument here that truck noise should be considered, but I'm just wondering, what you predict the noise will be.
So the truck noise, because the truck movements are relatively infrequent, we tend not to assess the noise on a continuous basis. It's observed more as an event, there's a truck passing type of scenario. So the noise levels we use, I think, called a maximum noise level for that. And so that maximum noise levels would be very similar to the trucks that already passed the site.
Right. And their increased frequency, that doesn't create an issue?
Not as far as I'm concerned, no.
Yeah. Just in terms of noise monitoring, would it be appropriate to increase the requirement for noise monitoring after a complaint is received or a non-compliance is detected?
Yeah, I think it's a strategy sometimes adopted. I think with the revised schedule of plant, the predicted noise levels are so far below the proposed limits that I would be very surprised if there was a non-compliance chief, but that sort of thing can be often weaved into a consent condition.
So you just don't think they're necessary based on the, the level?
Based on the levels that we're predicting this.
Yeah, okay. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, thank you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
John. No more. It's us for today.
Oh, well, we finished on a high note. So my question is, if we're looking at this bundle, attached to the consent are the plans from conditions, the plans from 11 to 18.
Correct.
That doesn't include item 9, which is the landform and rehabilitation plan.
Correct. There's a condition around a rehabilitation plan, but it doesn't include that plan.
Should it include it?
We can consider that. Yeah.
And some questions for Morrow or Mr. Recker and Dr. Keesing. The RL levels for those wetlands are shown at 3 metres RL relative to an 8 metre RL for the nearest dune. And just the question is are those important numbers to have in a plan attached to the consent to give an idea? And would that, has consideration given to those RLs working as sustained wetlands? In other words, are they going to be just wet areas, or are they going to have bodies of water, or what's contemplated by those wetlands? What type of wetlands are we thinking of? And just on, I guess, naming of these documents. So the landscape mitigation plan sort of incorporates part of the ecological restoration, but it's really not, that's not its core function.
Right.
And the landform rehabilitation plan is primarily about rehabilitation of landform, but it does have components that are related to the ecological. I'm just wondering, in terms of ecological remediation, whether we should identify which of the plans to be looking at in terms of the spatial layout and so forth, whether that's clear from the...
In terms of additions to the conditions around that.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that they are, but it just occurred to me that I'm finding information from a plan called a landform rehabilitation plan and a landscape mitigation plan.
Yeah.
But, and I suppose you could, it's possible to reconcile them to give you the components of an ecological plan. But is that intended, or how does it work?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking at the conditions, and I agree that there's no sort of locational requirement, just the area requirements. And so you're just wanting to have stronger certainty about what's going to be achieved on the site.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just made a note and I'll have chat to the team about that.
Okay. So that was my only supplementary question. Don't look so worried, does So thank you very much. It's been a very interesting day and very productive. And I thank you all for your attendance. And we will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. and continue the applicant's case. Other than that, I wish you a good evening and I hope we see you refreshed tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.